Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. The other day I uploaded a video about 6 simple levels we can draw on our charts to simplify range trading. However, I want to do another video about how this same technique can help us tremendously with trading trend days as well. We never know for certain what type of movement the day will bring, and thankfully these levels can help us identify the type of day almost immediately. Also, be sure to check out my video on how identifying range sessions versus trend sessions with the help of volume profile. These concepts pair perfectly together. Before we get started, I'll leave several discount codes for trading services I use in the description, including Sonar Labs, TradeEdX, Voland, and Elite Trader Fund. Lastly, if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow this channel. Also, be sure to hit the notification bell to get notified whenever I post a new video. With all that being said, let's get right into it. So, before we get started here, I just want to talk about the morning of 12/22, where we had a trend day, and I want to talk about what the data showed us. So, starting off, one of the big notable events that occurred were these signature prints that happened. And I've talked about in a previous video how these signature prints can actually act as a magnet. And at this point in time, these signature prints occurred under the current price of SPY, which I'll show shortly. And therefore, I assume that we would actually fall to this level. I even talked about in the data how this is considered these can act as magnets when these prints are this large, as well as some other factors in there regarding gamma and vana that is worth checking out. Now, the other thing is, well, I'll get into this more in a second, but once we did break that dark pool level, I want to talk about how we were able to identify the bottom before we actually got there. So, jumping right over to the chart, this is micro ES. Now this can be done on ES, micro ES, NQ, SPY, QQQ. You can use these charts to trade SPY and QQQ. I actually prefer using the futures charts to trade those whenever I'm trading SPY or SPX because they move in the same way. So the levels I had drawn from the morning session were the Asia lows and the Asia and London highs, which ended up being the same. So if you didn't see my previous video, I just marked the lowest point. There's no subjectivity, nothing. The Asia session really kicks into gear at 8 p.m. Eastern. So make sure if you're in a different time zone, you account for that. And then ends sometime around midnight, 1 a.m. even. And then the London session really kicks up its volume around 3 a.m., although it does begin before that. And so the highs for the Asia and London session were the same high, which certainly indicated that this would likely be the high for quite a while. And it was. And then we can see that the London lows occurred around 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., which is actually pretty late. I tend to mark the pre-market session for New York trading session starting from 7 a.m. and ending right before open at 9:30 a.m. So we can see here these label these as the pre-market highs, and then we had the pre-market lows, right? And so we can already see from this day we were in a massive downtrend, and that's one indication that it's going to be a trend day. Also, if you check out my volume profile video, there was another indication of that using volume profile, but I don't want to cover that here. I'm going to hide the Sonar Labs SMC indicator. It's an amazing indicator. I've started using it over my own because they have done a wonderful job of basically identifying all smart money concepts without really missing any, which is pretty impressive. So we'll hide that for now because we're not talking about that. And so the first Q we had, and then these other levels at the bottom, these were from the 12/19 session. So I just did the same thing, marked the Asia, London, and pre-market highs and lows, and that was it, and left those on the chart because they still could potentially be in play. I leave those for about a week or two. Once things get cluttered, I will remove the older levels because newer levels typically do replace those. But again, no subjectivity. And we can see, so also one thing I want to point out is if we look at SPY, we can see this pre-market activity is indeed shown here. So you could certainly mark the Asia session, the London session, and the pre-market sessions as well. And we can see that the dark pool print was this big gray level right here. So this was 380.60 at the time. That was the notable target where I thought we were going to immediately drop to continue this downtrend. Now, I didn't know what would happen once we reached it, of course. And that's something that we'll talk about here. But that's where we have to play the chart, really. So we can see when we open, big sign that's going to be a trend day is the lowest level out of all the levels I've marked. Immediately breaks with immense pressure. Now it does try to hold on that first candle, and then sellers just completely wipe it out. So now the next target is I'm watching SPY simultaneously to see what happens when we get to that dark pool level, but I'm also watching all these 6 pre-market levels from the 19th as well, because I know that they'll be very important. So this was a fantastic short opportunity on this momentum break. And we can see as we start moving lower, we immediately we start having trouble at the Asia highs. And if you're not in on this, this is a fantastic time to start getting in short when we're in a trend day. That's what we want to do, is we want to enter at the tops of these consolidations. And we can do that with limit orders, right? And we can stick limit orders right in here. You have several opportunities to catch that trade before we fully end up breaking down, at which point we get another leg down here. And so we continue falling and we continue having points of resistance on these pre-market levels that were marked, and we continue also having more short entry opportunities. Now the thing is, once we break down enough, and once SPY has crossed that dark pool level that I showed earlier, so that happened pretty early, right around 10 a.m. So this happened on this candle right here. If we were looking at ES, I needed to know where we were going from here, and that's where I started looking at the other data that I post about on Twitter, which you can certainly do the same thing. I made a video of how I do this. So we can see the SPY zone was creamed, just got blown through. We have these negative gamma accelerants that fall off around 378. And then our first major support, our first major positive gamma support came in at 375. So I posted this tweet out before we got there. Now that seems so far away, right? Because that was 5 points away. But what this basically means is that dealers were going to be selling with the move down all the way up to this point. They were going to back out. And then once we got to 375, they were actually going to start buying, right? And so if we look at what happened, we can see on SPY, we got all the way down to that large positive gamma level I had marked, and then immediately V bottom and reverse. Now, part of this as well was also from dealer market diary. There was a lot of 0 DTE put buying that was occurring here, and at some point when that needed to be de-hedged end of day, not only did this positive gamma level come into play, but the put de-hedging from 0 DTEs also helps these rallies, which, since 0 DTEs are pretty new on SPX and SPY, there's a lot of theories out there about how this is going to impact the market. And one of those theories is when we have these massive sell-offs where there's a lot of put buying occurring for those 0 DTEs across SPY and SPX. When those get de-hedged, we'll often see these large rallies occur, basically not always bringing us this far back. I think a lot of that also had to do with this magnet dark pool print that I've made a video about. You can see that this clearly had that magnet effect where we got too far under it, bounced off large positive gamma, puts get de-hedged, puts gets closed out in favor of call buying, and then boom, we get right back to that dark pool print. So that's amazing how the data can show all of this in advance. But if we get back to the point of this video about how we can use these pre-market levels, right? Because this is something free we can do to really enhance our trading game. We have another fantastic short opportunity right here, which we can easily limit in. And we just want to be patient to basically just try to ride the breakdown as much as we can. And you have several options. You can either close your full position when you reach the new levels below and look to get back in, or you can do what I prefer to do, which is scale out some of your position, take profits on a portion of it. I can't tell you how much you should personally take. It depends on how many positions you've opened, but it's certainly a good idea to secure the bag, and then at some point you can get back in. And we can see that this drop essentially continued till SPY reached that level we talked about around 130. So we can speed that up just so you can get an idea of how these levels react. We can see we bounced off this multiple times before we finally broke. However, each time we didn't come back as high as before, which gave fantastic short opportunities. That's a sign that buyers are weakening despite these pre-market levels. And one thing you'll probably notice here too is the name of these pre-market levels is PM low. I have 2 of them, A and B. That's because of the nature of that day. I wasn't sure which one would actually be the correct pre-market level. So if we go back to where I marked those, and this is something you can do, right? We have this level in the pre-market, which was a clear level around 8:30, and then right before open we went a little bit lower. So in this case, I decided to mark both and sort of treat them as an order block per se, or more of a zone than a static level. And so that's where that stuff is coming from. So if we scroll back to where we were here, we can see that we continue dropping. And now the question is, are we going to break London lows from that session? We just blast right through them. We do get a break and retest, so there is an opportunity to enter, as well as the Asian lows. And then right here is where it starts to get interesting because we fall. But then where we end up V-bottoming at is actually when SPY touched that 375, which isn't marked on this chart. Didn't have to do with these pre-market levels. That was something else. But you could see how these pre-market levels presented several short opportunities. And then what ends up happening is when we're not quite done yet. This should be the bottom right here. What ends up happening is as we come back up, these same levels play a part. So we get our change of character here, higher low, higher high, and we start moving back up. We get retests, we get buy ups. This is like a liquidity grab right here where it falls below and then gets a strong buy up. But we can see, again, we start reacting to those same levels that we already had drawn. So we don't need to change anything. We don't need to introduce subjectivity or try to get fancy with drawing levels midday or anything like that. And of course, I do draw order blocks and use smart money concepts, which I've talked about extensively, which you can see here if these do indeed play a part. So whenever a level doesn't necessarily hold cleanly, I am looking to make plays off of order blocks, like we can see right here. Pullbacks into order blocks. We had another one right here, that big buyout we had, that liquidity grab where it fell below this level and got bought up was actually due to this strong order block down here. So that's something that the Sonar Labs indicator does for me, which is amazing. So I don't have to draw those. And it's something that you can get a discount from the description with if you're interested in having those as well. And then essentially you already know how the rest of the day goes, but that's what I wanted to point out, was how useful these pre-market levels can be alongside the data when we're prepping for the day. It's really every morning when I'm going through all that data, I go through gamma, vanna, dark pools, things like that, and then I mark these pre-market levels, and I do it on any asset that I plan to trade, particularly around futures, because I primarily day trade and scalp futures. And they have just been so incredibly potent, and have even told us to expect the trend day as soon as the bottom, the pre-market low, the lowest level from the whole pre-market session had given out. It was a clear sign that we were going to have a trend day, among other factors. So I hope you found that helpful and learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.